Back when I was a teenager, a small and youngling teenager back in 2020 something, I was recommended a band by my friend, and they said like, oh, this is really good shit, you should listen to them. This is what I listened to, by the way. And I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, sure, I'll listen. Even though I only listened to K-pop back then. I check their most, like the top song of the artist, of course. I listen and I'm like, what the fuck is it? Sounds horrible. Why is a grown man moaning into my ear? The band was Deftones, the song was Cherry Waves, and at first I just didn't get it, okay? I just wasn't one of them. You either get it or you don't get it, and I didn't get it, okay? I had never listened to that kind of like genre before. I've never listened to like an alternative genre, especially not metal. Well, even though like Cherry Waves is more shoegazy, but yeah, I was horrified at the rest of the songs too. And I think I like Change, but like I was just confused. I was like, what the fuck? But then I started warming up to it and I started really appreciating it for what it was, and I thought it was awesome. This story of how I found Deftones and how Deftones became my favorite band of all time. I have so far listened to all of Deftones albums. There's some that I absolutely love and adore, and there's some that I don't feel so strongly about. There's none I really like hate, but we're gonna be talking about that today because I'm going to be ranking all of Deftones albums and giving a bit of backstory, just explaining some stuff that happened during the process. Today we're going to be covering 5 albums out of the 9 that they have out, ignoring the compilations of covers and B-sides. This is CORNEA-SAL, and today we're going to be ranking all of Deftones albums. As I explained to you, I'm gonna be listening to some songs from the album Speaking Of, just to refresh my memory. Alright, the first album I'm going to be talking about is Adrenaline, which was released in 1995. So first of all, let me share my thoughts on the album. So I feel like this one, since this is the first one, it's the least experimental one, without stopping to actually be a bit experimental on the way. They use really interesting rhythmic and lyrical combinations, as in tones and pitches, which is super cool to me. I mean, since it's their first album, I feel like their sound is way rawer. It's like, in a way, it's a simplified version of the Deftones we have today. Since Chino was younger, I feel like there's a lot of anger. His screams reaching peak. His voice is very healthy in this one. You may know that he had to have surgery for his vocal cords eventually because he was hurting himself. He was not using proper technique. But it was before all of that. Performance was really, really good. In 7 Words, which I think is one of the most known songs of that album, for good and bad reasons, they put styrofoam around the mic to create that distorted sound when he's yelling suck, and it was actually supposed to be not suck but fuck. They wanted it to sound really distorted so people couldn't actually understand what he's saying. Then Chino about 7 Words says, I'm sure a lot of people have heard this statement, but I'm gonna say it just because it's relevant. Chino, I wrote this back when I was 60 years old. It's probably one of the angriest songs I've ever written. It was about being oppressed by the people around me, the authorities. I felt like the whole world was against me. It was like I was lashing out at those people. The song is pretty controversial because it said the N-word, but he has since apologized and he said that he doesn't relate to who that person is. I think he also says that the song, he doesn't really like performing it. It was like him as his like youngest and most angry. It doesn't represent who he is today, but he sometimes sings it because people really like it. So yeah, personally, as in my taste, I like the album, but I haven't listened to it that much to actually get used to it because I'm more into the shoegazy Deftones or like the white pony anger of Deftones and not so much the raw side. But now that I'm listening to more hardcore, I will listen to it more because I feel like it deserves like the second try. Now that I'm listening to it right now on these headphones, I think it's good and I think I could definitely get used to it. I just need more time. So, to me, this album, in my taste, is a C tier. Why? Because like I think it's very listenable. I would like listen to it and enjoy it. I think that the other albums far surpass this one, and it's not that unique compared to the other ones. Next album, Around the Fur, which was released in 1997. By the way, I'm going to be streaming soon on my Patreon, where I'll also upload pictures, we chat, and I post videos of me post and pre-recording, as well as sneak peeks and other fun stuff. I'm going to be singing and talking to you guys, so if you want to join, I'd love to have you, just for the price of a coffee. Give me caffeine, save a life. I like that this album holds a lot of darkness within it. It's way less raw, more refined in its sound. Yeah, it has some really dark tracks. I feel like especially Mascara, which is my favorite from the album, is like really dark, just like whispery and ethereal in a way. It's really something that really shaped Deftones sound, and like they definitely improved from one time to the other. They are using different effects, and Chino is using his vocals even more. He's pushing them even more into different directions, making them darker, or making them softer, or screaming like crazy. I feel like the production also has to do with this, because they probably had a different producer. So yeah, I really enjoy this album. I have a bunch of these songs saved and I listen to them. I feel like in this album, before they were really being expressive and letting go, they're letting go even more. And then he was asked what the lyrics in My Own Summer meant, and he said, "I've been in the studio recording all night. I tried to sleep during the day and I couldn't because of all the light. Ended up putting tinfoil all over the windows." I really love the way Chino guides himself with the lyrics. Like, he doesn't really try to make songs mean something specific, so when you listen to it, you can just attribute your own meaning to it. Chino's favorite song in the album is also Mascara. He actually wrote it for a girl who ended up becoming his wife, and they eventually divorced in Saturday Night Wrist, which is gonna come in 2006. We're gonna talk about that later. Coming back to the album, the funny thing about the cover is that basically, first of all, Chino did not like the cover at all. He even allegedly said it was horrible. They were at like a party, and Kosek took a picture of this girl named Lisa Hughes. According to him, she was like a groupie, and basically he just photographed her because she had big tits. Eventually they just put it as a cover, and now it's pretty iconic. The first time I saw the cover, I was like, oh, that's kind of gross. But I feel like it kind of encapsulates the darkness and the kind of like, how to explain it? That unsanitary feeling that I get from the album. So to me, Around the Fur is an A tier because I think it has so many unique tracks. You can just really feel the evolution, and it's the kind of music that I like, that it's a bit angry, but it's also unsanitary. And even like Mascara, for example, you just hear it and it just kind of feels perverted in a way. In my mind, it just feels like he's being really forceful. He feels kind of like a stalker in that song. In Die the Flu as well, it sounds like he's whispering in your ear, and it's just really, I'm really into this one. Chino also said that he didn't like the video of Be Quiet and Drive. He said, "I like to make videos because I like to see visuals to our music. But the last video was just what our record label and MTV wanted to say. And we'll never ever do it again." I think it was really cool. They don't tell us to do anything, but this video we made, they finally had a favor of us, and it was a really one-sided version of what we're all about. It was this artsy, and I'm not really into that. I'm more into the harsh, brash parts of life that are just reality. And then, as some of you may know, Head Up is actually a tribute to Max Cavalera's, an ex-member of Sepultura's stepson who passed away. So White Pony, released in the year 2000. I feel like Deftones started leaning into this kind of like electronic digital sound, which is really interesting. I feel like here they were really challenging what's expected of musicians of their genre. You know, they actually said that Limp Bizkit was topping the charts back then. They didn't want to do something similar. They didn't want to be a standard new metal band, so they started making some different stuff. There's a lot of like different songs in this album, like Passenger with Maynard, singer of Tool, and Perfect Circle. And then Teenager is also very different from what they usually do. And then Korea, that song is just like Chino has like a phaser on his voice. It's that digital sound we hadn't heard anyone doing before. It also has a commercial song, which is Back to School, which apparently, if I recall correctly, their label had asked them to make like a radio-friendly song that was like more standard-ish. They made that one. I think it's the most popular one of the album, so the label is pretty right. You know, the rest of the album still remains a really good one. I remember one time I read that Chino has said that the song that really encapsulates Deftones sound is Digital Bath. This is what they had to say about White Pony. White Pony was definitely the only record up to that point where the art came before the music. I said I wanted to call it White Pony. There's an old 80s songs by Danish duo Laid Back. It has this line in it. If you want to ride the White Pony. It's a total drug reference. I looked on Clipper for a free art outline of a pony and I said that I wanted that to be our thing. We're going to call the record White Pony before any song was written. That was the only time we ever did it, and it's crazy how iconic it is now. And Abe said, it was our stand against everything that was going on at the time. I just think of it as a beautiful white horse running free. And at the time, that white horse running free was us. In the scheme of things at the time, all the stuff that was going on musically, trends and whatnot, it was very important to us to go somewhere different. Took a hard left and went the other way and carved our own path. Which we've been doing the whole time anyway, but that was intentional. Saying this about Stephen Carter, he said, he would write a song like Say Elite, and I was like, that's an awesome heavy tune. And then I said, look at this, and I written Digital Bath. We kept trying to outdo each other, and in the meantime, we were building a big tower of music. Songs that were great. It actually ended up working out in the long run. So some healthy competition. It's not bad. Then Chino said, we all moved into this big house in the Hollywood Hills right after New Year's. Everything I was writing about at the time, to a certain extent, I was kind of living. There's a lot of stuff in there lyrically that I was singing about that was going on, from Knife Party and Digital Bath. A lot of psychedelic, drug-induced songs. That's actually what was going on at the time. So they were smoking it up, they were injecting it up, and I guess it worked. So yeah guys, don't do drugs, but it doesn't mean that haven't worked before. And he said that he's really proud of it and he thinks it's a really dynamic record. Which I think so too, because there's some calm songs, there's some heavy and angry songs like Elite. There's also kind of like midways like RX Queen, which is not particularly heavy, but it's not super calm either. This album for me is a B. I think that although it has some gems, it just doesn't get to me spiritually as some other albums do from Deftones. There's also, I think that Passenger is absolutely brilliant, and my favorite one is definitely Elite. You're like attention! So next up, we're going to talk about the self-titled album, which was released 2003. I don't particularly dislike this album, but I don't particularly like it so much either. I think there are like about 3 songs that I would actually listen to there. I just feel like it's missing that it factor. I just don't know what it is exactly. I feel like some of these songs were too adventurous, but not in composition, but as in like public opinion. Songs like Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event, which is my favorite by the way, and Lucky You, these are not songs that would typically, I don't see the typical Deftones listener listening to these songs. So maybe I feel like they kind of fail with the public there, and it was their less sold album, which is going to lead to the creation of Saturday Night Rest, alright? I feel like Minerva is also a really, really good song from the album, and I feel like that's the song from the album. Hexagram as well, but like maybe the heavy songs of this album, I can't difference them that much from each other as I could in the previous album. So I feel like that's why this one failed commercially. There are songs that are way too out there for the typical Deftones listener, and songs that are too similar in nature for what they have been doing before. So it was not a shocker. It's not a bad album, but it's definitely not an attention-calling one, in my opinion. I feel like it's still pretty underrated for what it is. People need to give it more of a try. And I actually couldn't find an interview specifically about the self-titled album, but I did find a small part of Chino talking about Minerva specifically. Okay, so the interview says, so when it came time to this first single off of the next album, you guys went with Minerva, and I couldn't have been much further from what else was going on in the radio at the time. It's basically a shoegaze song. And then he said, yeah, I don't think there was anything political behind it. It was one of my favorite songs on the record. Pretty much since Adrenaline, we've been fighting an uphill battle with some of our old school fans who just love us for the aggressive part of our band. Much as I like it too, I've had this conversation many times. Not always there, I'm not always mad, like this one sucked. And I got in trouble for calling out other bands at the time for not really evolving, but still writing songs about how it sucks to be a kid. For one, I'm not a kid. Second of all, I'm not sad. I'm actually enjoying making music. And then the interviewer asks, Do you feel that self-titled album's kind of underappreciated in retrospect? He says, no, I don't think so. We got out of it what we put into it. This sort of everybody sort of taking a really relaxed position as far as making records. One of the bad things that came from White Pony was the fact that we were successful and we really took our time and spent too much money. Because we were successful with that record, we took that mindset to the next level with the self-titled record. And we really struggled with our work ethic, and that record took us almost 2 years to make. That was the time of White Pony. I don't think this album is lazy in any form, but I think that with some more forethought behind the songs, they could have made it a hit. It just needs some tweaks. It's just missing the it factor that made all the previous albums so unique. So you have Adrenaline that is really raw, and it's really angry in all of their songs and has some dynamics that people haven't seen before as far as metal bands go. Then Around the Fur has this element of perversion. It's really sexual in its nature as well, which is something that wasn't in the previous album as far as I'm concerned. And then White Pony was this really dynamic album that just stirred everyone. Then the next one is just not that attention calling, so people don't adore it as much as they love the previous ones. So sadly, I'm gonna put this one in the D tier just because I would never listen to it by itself. I still do think that it has some gems, but I think that it's the weakest one in the discography so far. Next up, we're going to talk about Saturday Night Wrist. And this album is my favorite Deftones album, so I'm heavily biased. This one is the more emotional one we've gotten so far. It has its heavy parts as well as it has its emotional parts. Some of the stuff is more shoegazy as well. I adore this one, especially I have a very special connection to it because it's one of the first ones I listened to. I'm pretty sure it was the first one I listened to. In this album, like, it just has so many good title songs, you know, like songs with the it factor. They're there. You have Cherry Waves, you have Kim Dracula, you have Hole in the Earth, and what I like a lot as well is Cersei's. I just think it's gorgeous. They are adding a lot of that airy element that we see on later albums. So a lot of like background synths and Chino singing with his soft voice, a really melodic voice, and just a drop in Cherry Waves. It's really gorgeous and like progressive in its way. I think it's one of the songs that made Deftones get the reputation that they have today. It's also so romantic as well, which is something we have seen before, but it was more raw, and this is more like romantic, like, what do you sink down with me? It kind of reminds me of Titanic, actually. I don't know if that was based on Titanic, but now that I think about it, it kind of is. And you know, like the laughs in the background, and then Beware, it's so, I'm gonna say this word, I'm not sure if I'm using it correctly, but it's very discordant in a way. It's mysterious, and again, it's super dark. And this album is one that Deftones went through most pain in. So basically, in 2004, their label told them, hey, since self-titled didn't do very well, we're going to make another album and make it do well this time. They started writing Saturday Night Wrist. Chino could write some songs, but the problem was the following. So basically, he was married back then with Celeste, this girl that we talked about before, that Mascara was written for. Chino was cheating on her. He basically had a girlfriend on the side. He found out that his girlfriend got pregnant. He already had 2 kids by the time this happened. He couldn't concentrate, having a really hard time. And 6 months into it, he basically told his wife, and his marriage didn't last long. And after that, he started drinking heavily, and he started growing distrustful of if his singing and his work was good. And then Chino eventually said that he felt like he had hit a wall, that he felt really pressured. So he went on tour with his other band, Team Sleep, and he wanted to do something that he didn't feel pressured about. And he told his bandmates this, and of course, they weren't really happy, because he was supposed to be there writing the record, not going on tour. He hadn't told anyone, allegedly, so I didn't know what he was going through, but still, like, it just felt selfish of him. And 6 months after he left, they basically hadn't heard from him, and they were like, what, like, let's just find another singer. that. And then when he came back, he found out that they were thinking about kicking him out, and he got really mad, and he made Hole in the Earth, basically complaining about his friends. And the album title, Saturday Night Wrist, talks about like when you're hangover and you sleep on your arm and then your wrist is weak. And he said that the metaphor of the song was that he felt there was something wrong and that there was something that felt empty. I know the song says that I hate all my friends. And then talking about Pink Cell Phone, our favorite song from their discography, of course, to me was out of character in a way, but so what? The record to me was already boring. I was so uninspired by it. At least something like that would just take the record out of context and put in another thing. It was a really fun experiment. I was in the studio, I was already working on the song, and Annie Hardy was hanging around the studio that day, and I got in there. It was totally in the moment. Didn't expect to use it, and at the end, we just put it on the album. I remember when it first came out, people were like, what the f is this? That's the reaction I wanted. I wanted people to either really not understand or just be like, why would it do that? And why not? Especially because, like I said, I felt like that record was such a Frankenstein together mess. Why not just take it one step further? So when Chino returned from his store with Tim Sleep, everyone was kind of awkward because like, hi guys. And their manager put them together, they made a reunion. Everyone said how important Deftones was to them. And that basically cleared the air because everyone was thinking that the other person didn't care about them, you know, like it was like a big communication issue. And then after they worked through their differences and they actually started making the songs that were here today, this was all over the course of like a year and 2 years of pure miscommunication and problems. Just imagine being in that situation. It sounds really hard. So they definitely earned their success. So after that, apparently they cleared the air and they started making the record, and before they knew it, it was done. It was in 2006 and it was a huge success. To me, my humble little self, I think this album goes on the S tier of my taste, and it goes maybe on the A tier of awesomeness, because to me this album is just super special. I adore it a lot. Alright, so I think I can definitely say that they earned everything they got. They worked really hard. Chino went through a whole divorce, then he went away and everyone was f***ing confused. And when that happened, they put the B-sides and rarities section together. They made that compilation. I forgot to mention this, but actually the one I'm not mentioning, B-sides, actually has my favorite song, well actually cover, but song from Deftones of all time, Savory. That's my favorite song of all time. Feel free to tell me in the comments which are your favorite ones from here, and if there's one you hate, there's one you haven't heard of, hear a song. For example, there's a lot of the ones on self-titled I never hear anyone mentioning, like Moana or Good Morning Beautiful. Like I've never heard them being mentioned by another band. Like it's always Cherry Waves or like some other ones from other albums that are more appreciated. But yeah, next video I will be doing the lasting 4 albums, Diamond Eyes, Gunyokan, Gore, and Alms. So if you want to see what happens, then stick around. This was CORNEA-SAL. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you